Hi, everybody. Very nice to not see you all, but I hope that we're gonna have a really good conversation.
We're going to have a great one. Now, I purposely added you to the session to see your face because you are one of the most humble people that I've met. And today we're going to be talking about design leadership on a global scale. And you have worked for companies like Wells Fargo, Ford, geez, DocuSign, I could go on. And to that, you've also worked across continents. So obviously you're from Colombia. People will start hearing the accent soon. So
Yes.
you've worked in South America, you've worked in the US, and you've worked across Europe. And what we're going to talk through today is design leadership across all of those roles. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Catherine, and it's I'm very excited to be here. I never get opportunities to share a little bit of my experience in this format, so I'm really glad to be here. A little bit of I think two things before we start that I would love to share with the audience is the first one is this is based in my learnings. This is not based on any kind of like scientific studies about like diversity and doing projects in multi continents. So I hope it's useful. I hope to write a book someday, but we're not there yet. And the second one is that when you and I started talking about what it means to have a team and lead a team, especially a high performance team in these different contexts in different continents. It's I think it's useful to share with everybody my definition of high performance. And high performance is a team that can do their best outputs and that the leader actually opens the right space for them to solve the conflicts, overcome the obstacles, and actually do the best output and the best outcome that is possible. And so that's a little bit where I'm coming from.
I love that. Already questions around
I bet.
So I have a few kind of set, and I want to take this in a little bit of a chronological order. So can you talk about early influences, maybe pivotal moments in your career that shaped your path towards both where you are today in the US, but also from a design and design leadership perspective?
Yeah, let me talk about those moments in a way that kind of like reflect on how I do leadership today. So one of the my earliest lessons was actually to listen to and be open to new paths and new ways to explore. And that goes back to almost my first job that I had really open in my career. I was planning to go to Barcelona to get my master's, and I was working for a research startup, and we were developing new methods to to get to customers, and that's when I fell in love with research. But that experience with that job was actually a failure at the time, and I was really really down and trying to figure out like what was going to be the next thing that I wanted to do. I wanted to double down and move to Barcelona, and then life actually gave me the opportunity to start working here in the US. And while I was still saving to go to Europe, then I met my now wife, and today is our anniversary, so we've been married for 25 years. But that opened a whole new life for me, and that whole plan of going to Barcelona kind of like faded away. But I'm very grateful, right? So it's that was an early lesson to be open to those paths and be open to new learnings, and to take those opportunities. And if you fast forward 10 years after, then I had the opportunity to move from San Francisco to Madrid to work with an outstanding team on both sides of the Atlantic. And actually, I had never been to Europe before, so I got there with my visa, my laptop, and my family, and just to start a new life. And it was actually a really great success, and a lot of my growth came from that. So I'm very grateful for it. And then the last thing that I wanted to share is that I'm a little bit of a history buff, but also I'm very interested in understanding where my family comes from. And one of the things that I've been learning a lot and trying to kind of like understand my type of leadership, because to your point, I am not an alpha leader that goes and like it's just screams all the time, charge, but more trying to bring community and bring the best of the teams forward. And that comes from a little bit from my heritage of the Native American groups that I come from culturally. And until I understood that, that was like 6 months ago that I found some stuff that actually helped me be more comfortable with that type of leadership. And it gets me excited that, getting the power to lead a team is to share that power and augment everybody's skills and possibilities, not only to, like gather it or anything like that. And I feel comfortable with that stance. And that's part of why I'm so, excited to be here to share that point of view.
Amazing. Can you drill into that a little bit more on your cultural heritage, what you found out? Because I like where you're going with that. A lot of people listening are probably thinking, I'm not a leader. I'm soft. I'm on the sideline. So how did that help shape your thinking?
I think that what I know so far, right, is that there are different types of leadership, and the type of leadership that I understood from reading history is that um, some people call it like servant leaders, or service leaders, or things like that. But it's a very beautiful concept that when you put it in practice, what it means to me is to say, how can I open this space for people to use their own voice and talk straight, for example, with executive leaders with the right setup. And that means that it's more of a collaboration of of almost jamming together, if it was a jazz band, let's put it that way, than having a solo leader, doing all the music while the orchestra is in the background. It's a little bit of a different stance, and it has worked so well so far. It's not for everybody, but I think that most of the teams, have appreciated that, and I have appreciated it as a leader for sure.
Yeah, love it. And in the very beginning, you mentioned about leadership in terms of how you lead, and the success of the outcome is based on the leader versus the team. How much am I getting in that right, in what you took? Because it was such a little point that you made. But how much influence percentage do you think that it's on the leader versus the team? What's the dynamic there?
I think it's an art and not a science to answer that question. One of the things that I have learned in the past couple of years is that one person, specifically like executive leaders and leaders that are very senior, can have a lot of influence on how the team, and it could be a project team or it could be a function team like UX team, can take and move forward. And it all comes down to I think it's three things that matter a lot. One is assumptions of what can and cannot be done. Values. So what are the values in terms of, like, is the leader trying to be very close to the work, or trying to be kind of like more of a strategic leader, very, very close, very, very on the top. And then the third one is biases. And I say biases that could be, positive and negative. And those are assumptions that don't get checked, or understandings that might not drive the team the right way. And in terms of biases, one that comes to mind is in Silicon Valley, for example, there is a bias, or a very strong trend towards having projects, especially on startups, that have to have a very strong growth. And that actually decides a lot on a leader, like what kind of innovation they're going to take and what kind of innovation they're going to kill. And teams get affected by it, right? Because they can have good ideas that maybe don't match that type of growth. And even if they're quality ideas that could create a good product, is not the right time or the context to move it forward. And the leader has to measure, engage, how to keep the team engaged on the right ideas and direct them towards those kind of outcomes, understanding the context really well.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, it is an interesting. Everyone's focused on growth, but at what cost? Can I switch over to the global perspective?
Sure.
So, taking on your background there, moving, influence, taking opportunities almost based on personal opportunities. So, the personal opportunities came first, and or was it a work opportunity? Personal opportunities hit first?
Yeah, can you repeat the question? I'm sorry, I think I'm losing you.
So if you, like you mentioned, having life and everything, and the opportunities that everything around. What did you take your opportunities in your career? Were they because of personal choices to, or were they because of professional choices? Did you move together?
I think I think at first it was more personal choices and personal interests. For example, when I started my career in product design at Intuit, I had a deep passion for things like mobile and mobility,
Mhm.
and that actually got me to get involved into projects that were super interesting to me. And fast forward a year and a half later, then without knowing or wanting to be so, I became kind of like a point of reference for other design teams to develop their own design for mobile experiences in the company. And it was really rewarding because I got to look at different types of products during the company. And then, as I mentioned before, going to Spain was also a personal choice where I wanted to work more deeply on innovation, but also work closely to markets at home in South America and also in in Spanish-speaking Europe. And I ended up working with other markets in Germany and England. So that was a first a personal motivation to get there, but then it became more of a professional driver after, and that's when I realized that having the opportunity to lead the practice, I could create a much wider impact, and that actually had almost was a pivot in my mid career. I think like 8 years ago or something like that, where I was much more focused on developing that type of leadership. And to your point, in a bunch of that first part of my career, I was thinking like, I don't know if I want to be a big, like leader at scale. But then after I realized that I could find my own voice, so that was actually really rewarding and really positive for me.
Yeah, no, amazing. And working in all of those countries, different language barrier, like different language cultures, how has that influenced your approach to both leadership and design?
I wasn't prepared for that when I first got exposed to it. But my I guess my lesson is that the culture does not define a person's behavior or a team's behavior, but it does bring a lot of color of like what are the assumptions and the decisions that they make. Some cultures are very focused on, and I'm talking maybe some places in Europe are very focused on structure and rigor that they bring, for example, to research or that they bring to the execution of design. And some other cultures are more flexible in terms of like how they pivot quickly and improvise and iterate. All teams can do that, but they bring these assumptions, from their perspective, and that's why I talk about these kind of like trends, but also biases, things that you don't check. But there are also cultural traits that are really positive. When I was thinking about this, my experience internationally, one thing that I remember that my friends from Spain shared was this whole notion of, and I'm sorry about the translation because I'm not translating it right, but it's something like run away forward. When you hit a point where like it's there's a lot of ambiguity or like things feel very adverse in a project or in a conversation, sometimes it's good to just like press through to see how do you go through, so you are really like running away as fast as you can, but you're going forward instead of backwards. And that actually has helped me a lot in some cases where like I said, like things are adverse, and have helped my teams also to like push forward.
I love that so much. I'm going to use that tomorrow.
Also good.
And I guess what's the goal with teams when it comes to facilitating them? Like from your perspective, what's the ultimate goal with building out your team?
Yeah, so I think that there are two things that I would share with the audience. One is internally the team makeup. The idea is to create a space where they can be when conflict comes or like when adversity comes. That's when if the makeup of the team and the dynamics of the team are able to withstand that pressure. And for a leader, creating that space of slowing down and understanding people's cultural backgrounds, understanding their own needs when they're joining a project, and understanding their skills when they're trying to apply that challenge. Not everybody deals well with the ambiguity of a pure greenfield project, and those same people can be really good at, like, making a product perform in market, and understanding those kind of traits, from the psychology of the person and the team, as well as from the skills and experience. That makes that's a task that, because sometimes we don't have time as leaders, we overlook. I'm sorry, but we should oversee. And if you take the time to do that, and then create the space for them to facilitate conversations, for example, like, I remember one of my managers always started a brainstorming with this silent, a contribution, and then it went to discussion, and that actually bypassed a lot of the kind of like the initial team dynamics of different cultures. For example, in Bogota, in Colombia, we are more solid in terms of feedback. Americans are way more straightforward. Europeans are more diplomatic about stuff. So these kind of changes in the dynamics create that space, and that space is one of the goals that you come to create for a team that can be high performing. It gives them the space to, like, take risks, to challenge each other in a very constructive way, and that kind of stuff. And then the second part of it is kind of like the external forces that come to it. So working with other VPs and executive leaders. I mean, it's really hard for a team to present to these teams and kind of like get approval on budgets or like plans or things like that. But what I have learned is that the team should also understand that these people have a lot of pressure, and that they are as interested as can be as interested as and invested as they are in the project, but they are looking at 50 of those or 25 of those conversations, and they have less time. So helping the team to facilitate, to get to the point, share the information that really matters. And mostly, one thing that people don't do very often is just to come very straight to say, hey, I please help me with this, please help me with the budget, please help me with the plan. That actually focuses the team much more to have a good conversation with the executive in the very short time that they have, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, things like that. So working as a leader to prepare the information for the leader and the data, so when the team comes, they can have a conversation. I think it's a little bit of those two dynamics that are very positive as a leader to have as an end goal. The thing that I would share that I think people don't consider as often to go deep into is understanding the context of the organization in those two conversations. Sometimes the ideas are really strong, but the organization is not ready to deliver, or it's not the right time for a product to actually introduce that idea. And understanding, being aware of that context, and being aware of what I call the readiness of the organization to deliver what the team is proposing, I think is very important to have to be successful in those two contexts.
Yeah. How dependent, whoever pitches that proposal, how dependent do you think the decision on whether to go with something or not is depending on the team or the individual? Like, it could be the right option, but maybe they have not confidence in the individual or the team. Or it could be the wrong one, but they have overconfidence in the team.
Right. I think it goes case by case. I don't think I can say that it's like one person versus the team. Like, usually my experience is that the teams are really good performing and creating solutions for it, but there is a task of translation, like a last step that needs to be taken in order to get there. So I think that for the leader, it should look at both questions. Like, for the translation, for example, the question is the team's outputs and goal aligned with the organization? And that includes metrics, and that includes, also the differentiating what the company is asking for, or the client, or the project, or the division, versus what they need to have. And sometimes they need to have clarity on their scope in order to get to that ask that they want for. So that translation is something that the leader needs to look at, for example, when the project is being scoped. And then on the flip side of that, a leader, as a person like a leading of a team, has these other conversations with other leaders. I think that I mentioned to you in one of our conversations how looking for a new way of working with other VPs required for us to leverage some of the assets that we had already, but translate them, for example, translating the outcomes that we wanted that we understood that customers wanted. And this was a DocuSign, but understanding those outcomes needed a translation to make actionable for other VPs of product and engineering to understand how those outcomes frame really well some of the capabilities and some of the features that they wanted to have. And that was part of the journey of finding a new way of working together and keeping researchers and designers really close to that conversation, but knowing that the leader is going to take some of those conversations, in a different context, is very important. So I think that more than thinking like, is it a person, is it a team, is more understanding that, like two-sided conversation and the dynamics that go on both sides of that in order to be successful.
I love it. And looking at leadership evolution, you talked about psychology and understanding how individuals work. So you get to be a team lead, but then you start to be leading those team leads. So you become a leader of leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe a significant transition, I guess, in your career of taking that jump from not just being a team leader to a leader of leaders?
Yeah, I think it happened as new opportunities came by. So I think I mentioned before, like I had the opportunity to lead the design practice when I was in Spain. Then, I came back and I had the opportunity to lead a smaller teams with big scale. And now more recently at DocuSign, lead bigger teams, like looking at a whole portfolio. And as you assume more of these roles, of leading the practice or leading a big team, and you look at multiple, streams of work or sectors of the industry, for example, that we were doing innovation in Spain, or different products here at DocuSign, then you start understanding a little bit of that need to be a leader of leaders, where like, and that's why I mentioned a little bit like the pressures that a VP, for example, or a senior VP or an executive have. Like the asks for performance maybe are at a quarter and not 6 months that a project can take, right? For an executive. And the number of projects that they're looking at is 50 and not one, like a team can focus on. So to me, the understanding of that second context was what helped me the most to adapt, my style of communication, the team's guidance, the outputs in terms of the artifacts, maybe creating a much higher level artifact to have conversations with executives, and something much deeper that would help product teams to act upon those things. For example, with customer profiles at DocuSign, the team did an excellent job of developing a metaphor to explain that, and reduce the profiles from, like, I think we had 60 to just less than 10. That actually accelerated a lot of that conversation. And same as with people, there are little artifacts that make a lot of difference. For other projects that I have worked for, sometimes a little Madlib template to help teams create the same format for describing the outcome of a customer, or a simple quickly sketched storyboard to bring the humanity of the customer to engineering and product, and of course to the designers, makes a lot of difference, and it can be something that can be done really quickly. So that those artifacts help to speak the same language and at the same altitude as other leaders, while at the same time be aligned with the teams doing the more in-depth work.
Yeah, I love it. And that kind of sings to collaborative dynamics. So you've gone through a lot of pieces there. And can you tell us more about the DocuSign methodology for reducing those, so how they come up with reducing those personas from 60 to 10?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna, give kudos to my peers, Morgan and Marne, who presented kind of like the process of, like, reducing those profiles in Ireland with UXDX last year. So worth for the audience to take a look if they haven't. But in terms of from my perspective, because I was playing the role of acting VP. The mandate from the executives or the guidance from the executives was to say, hey, can we focus more, be more explicit about the outcomes for the customers and the outcomes for the business, and see how they connect to each other? And that actually created kind of like a tangibility for the teams to understand, the two sides of that. And it was possible, as I mentioned before, because research, at different levels, not only UX research, but other partners have gone deeply into what are the customer outcomes, how can we summarize them and synthesize them, and then bring, like something that can be 300 tasks into, umbrella jobs that are just 8 or 10, and then put the capabilities under that. So we did a little bit of that, of finish the synthesis for those jobs, bring it in and connecting it to storyboards to be in the human story and the context of use. We call it moments of use. And then after that, now that the teams were a little bit more familiar with the kind of like the human context of use and then the outcomes, then it was much easier for leadership as well as for the teams to start classifying the capabilities underneath those moments. And these are not rocket science methods, right? Like we all use it very often, but it was more about the moment and the combination of those and the translation and the synthesis, and the openness in communication, which of course could have been better, but we tried to share as much of the kind of like the evolution of the steps as we could from the UX leadership, that got us up to a point where we could understand, for example, the same capability could be present in 3 or 4 moments of the experience. That means that the requirements would change for the roadmap, and that created a sequence for that capability to move forward over time. A roadmap of a year, a roadmap of a year and a half. So it was an iterative process. The VPs, my peers of product and operations and engineering, were engaged, as they understood better these things, and then the product directors and their teams actually felt that they were more in sync with other divisions and other areas of DocuSign product development when they were thinking about these roadmaps, and that was actually very rewarding. But of course, this is a long process, right? In order to fulfill those roadmaps, we're talking about not only quarters, which is what we're planning for, and also to respond to executives by years of road mapping, and they're still in that journey. Let's put it that way.
Oh, fantastic! I'm going to wrap up with 2 questions. One is reflection on your journey. What has been the most important lesson you've learned about building and nurturing UX?
I think the 2 lessons are, the basic one is we're all people, and it's important to create the space to connect at the most basic level, person to person, and that becomes very salient when conflict comes, and it becomes very important, for example, to set and declare a common purpose for the team and make sure that the team is aligned and understands that purpose. And that includes also doing a little bit of aligning the values, or maybe sharing values that each one of these people, especially if they come from different backgrounds, even within the same company and different domains, that's very important. And the second one, I think I mentioned it already, is to nurture the team and to set them up for success. Doing a little bit of digging down of understanding the awareness of what is the agenda for each one of those professionals that are coming in, what is the agenda of the project, which has to do with purpose, what is the agenda of the executives around, and kind of like the other leaders that are around, including the leader from design. And that actually starts kind of like understanding how to translate the work to these other ways of measuring success, let's put it that way, because that comes with metrics. And it starts mapping and creating a rationale on how this project and the solutions are in line with the readiness that the organization has to deliver. Like I was mentioning before, with creating these moments of use and realigning the roadmaps, to accelerate delivery. So that awareness is the second lesson that I would like to share with the audience to take into account.
Great. Yeah, and I think one thing that I've learned from talking to you and meeting your team, like I've met Marinee and Morgan, I've also met Pam on a completely different team, and it's treating people equally. So I don't believe that you put in levels. So you never you empower your team at any level, and you've been empowered, which I think is really important to reflect on as well.
Yeah, so they can have their own voice. Totally. That's one of my core tenets, and I try to do it as much as possible.
Yeah, and you can really see that. Now I'm going to end on your greatest achievements, because I don't think you talk about it enough. Focusing on a project, what do you consider your greatest achievement, and tell us why?
All right. In terms of projects, I think that a project has success at a point in time. So let me bring two that are close to my heart. One was a video service that we created in Spain and launched it as the first solution for people to get access to all the videos that are available in all channels, TV, theaters, streaming, cable. And what was so rewarding about it is that it was an excellent team. It was a very very small team. We got to create a different brand from Telefonica, which was kind of like a first, at the time. But when the service had his own arc and went down, I think it was like 5 or 6 years later. We got hundreds of. The product manager was telling me that we got hundreds of emails and communications from the customers saying, "Hey, like, what am I going to, how am I going to find out what I want to watch if I don't have you?" And that type of, like, feedback goes beyond customer satisfaction, because it's not prompted, it's not research. It's actually people coming back and saying, like, "Hey, we want to continue using your stuff, even if the company and the organization has moved forward," right? And then the second one is, I was part of a small startup for several years, and we had a product that went into pilot, and it was about sharing medical research with different markets around the world, and we had, good growth, even if the product never went beyond pilot. But when we did field research, we discovered the depth of the need that the industry had on bringing different voices, and voices that were not only, related to the main pharmaceutical companies, on very important research that will help other communities, let's say, for example, in Colombia, or, in places in Asia. And that understanding that need, and knowing that we were answering that need, and knowing that it was working as a pilot, that actually was really really rewarding. And as leadership, of course, like leading, I'm very honored to have led for several months the team in DocuSign through so many changes that we went through, changing the way of working, including other teams, starting new disciplines within the team, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it really is phenomenal. Thank you so much, Ricardo. That was really insightful. I really really appreciate it. I think people will get a lot of value. There have been a few questions. I might message you. We could maybe do on LinkedIn, if you could do a Q&A, that'd be really super, because I think we missed out on a bit. So thank you. I will talk to you soon. I'll see you in New York.
Thank you. Yes. And thanks everybody. I really appreciate, the opportunity to share my experience.